What is up, people? Welcome to week 4 of American government. Um, I can't even believe it's week 4. So this is starting the 6th week that we have not been at school. That's including that 1 week we had off before spring break, and then this is the 4th week we've been out. Um, so remember, if you have any questions, please feel free to email me. Anytime, right? I check my email every day. It's on my phone. You can email me or message me also on Play-Doh, and I check that on a regular basis as well. A little slower on with those on the weekends, but throughout the week, I'm really good at that. As of right now, we have no update on whether or not the governor is going to open schools back up for the remainder of the year. I hope he does, but I don't really think it's looking that way, like it's going to happen this year because of, right, we're still in quarantine with a month left of school. I highly doubt they're going to want 1,500 people at a high school in less than a month. So fingers crossed, I hope we go back though. And then talking about today's lesson. Today's lesson is the legislative branch. Legislative branch is incredibly, hopefully, easy for everybody because we went over it really in depth in class. I hope a lot of you retain that, kept that knowledge, so that we can use that to do really well in this lesson. A majority of you probably could take the mastery test and pass it without even going through this lesson because it's that much review. However, go through the lesson, refresh, read everything, answer the questions, and then take that mastery test. All right, so I'm going to share my screen here and we will start. Oops. All right. All right, the legislative branch. Let me move myself. Let's switch that in. Okay. So, oops. So your objective for today, or for this lesson, you'll be able to examine and describe the structure and powers of the legislative branch, which we've already done. That's already been a content statement and an objective we've had. Alrighty, so the structure and powers of Congress. Congress was first around. Its first form was the Continental Congress. That existed basically a little bit before the Revolutionary War to after the war. Right, the Articles of Confederation, or our first Constitution, existed under the Continental Congress. A lot of issues with that first Congress and Articles of Confederation. We know that it was a rough draft that allowed us to get things right the second time. The original capital of the United States was in Philadelphia. After the Revolutionary War ended, that moved to New York City briefly, and then it was in New York City until Washington, D.C. was built, which we'll talk about on the next slide. But this is all about Congress and how important Congress is. It is the most important American political institution, right, for democracy. Without a Congress, the people would have no opinion, and our economy and society and civilization would crumble. We need Congress. They pass and fix laws. So this is just a brief little history about why Washington, D.C. is the capital. Washington, D.C. is not a state. It is a federal, basically, zone. Maryland and Virginia both gave up or donated some land, a 10 square mile of territory that made up Washington, D.C. They do have the 23rd Amendment. We talked about that. Gave D.C. residents the right to vote. Right. However, they do not have any representatives in the House or Senate that can vote because they're not a state. People are trying to change that because they think, hey, those people there need a say. However, they are not a state. And until they become a state, that's not going to happen. They're not going to have a say in the House or the Senate. That's just how it goes. So the House of Representatives and Senate. Basically, we talked about this, how our Congress, which consists of it's the legislative branch is called Congress, and it has 2 houses. So Congress has 2 houses, the House of Representatives and the Senate. That means it is a bicameral legislature. Look at that root word, by, which we've talked about hundreds of times. I've said that. So they did that, and they wanted each one of those, the Senate and the House, to have different roles, and that was the intention from the beginning. The Senate, or let's see, I think they start with the House here. So the House, it's meant to be closer to the people, right? Because there's more representatives, and they represent a smaller number of people, right? Because there's more representatives in the House. There's 435. The Senate is supposed to be a more exclusive club, right? There's more strict requirements to get into the Senate, right? They're a more slow-moving body, the elite. They have a lot of experience, and that's how they have gotten to that point in the Senate. Now remember, there's only 100 senators. Every state has 2, right? Ohio has a lot of people to only be represented by 2 senators. So that means that the senators are more removed from the population. Representatives in the House are closer to everyday people like you and me. State legislatures, up until the 17th Amendment, which we talked about, and state legislatures was Ohio's State Assembly. They had the responsibility of electing senators until the 17th Amendment. Right? That all changed it. Now we vote for both representatives and senators. The congressional terms and sessions. All right, so this is just a quick overview. So a term is how many years a representative or senator serves. Members of the House of Representatives serve 2-year terms. They serve for 2 years, and they have to run for re-election. Members of the House serve 6-year terms. Not the House, but the Senate serves 6-year terms, and every 6 years they have to be re-elected. Okay, so House 2 years, Senate 6 years. Now, a session of Congress is just every year. Right, there's a new session every year. That's just, a session is a fancy word for just the House of Representatives or the Senate meeting. Right, it's a big meeting. A session is a meeting. So there is a session every year. So in a 2-year congressional term, there are 2 sessions because there's a session each year of the term. I hope that makes sense. And that is, I remember everything starts on January 3rd now, gets rid of the lame duck session as a result of the 20th Amendment, which is in the presidential amendments. If y'all remember that. All right, rule of law, just real quick. We know it goes back to the Magna Carta in England and John Locke. The rule of law means the government has to follow the rule of law. I mean, they have to follow the laws. They can't take whatever roles and power they want. They have to stay, their power has to be limited in some way. Right? One part of that is the due process clause of the 5th Amendment, right? Our due process clause states no person shall be deprived of liberty, of life, liberty, or property without the due process of law. So basically, the government can't take away your life or your property without justification. There has to be a reason for them to be doing that. Okay? All right. So rule of law. Everybody, all government officials have to follow the rules and the laws. Checks and balances, we talked a lot about this. Checks and balances are how the 3 branches check and balance each other out. How they make sure that every other branch is doing what they are legally responsible for doing. To make sure the president isn't doing illegal things. This is a nice little diagram that breaks down what we talked about in class for numerous days and numerous hours. Each branch, and then you have what they can do toward each other. So for example, the executive branch can veto a law proposed by Congress. All right, so that is a check the president has on Congress. And then vice versa, Congress or the legislative branch can override a veto if they get that 2/3 majority vote. Over here, so it's from executive to judicial. The executive branch nominates Supreme Court judges or federal judges. However, the judicial branch can then declare actions the president takes constitutional or unconstitutional, meaning do they conflict or agree with the Constitution. So that's just breaks down their roles, I think, in a very easy to comprehend way. And also, don't forget that the legislative branch can impeach both judges, federal judges, and the President of the United States of America. So bicameral. So our system, a bicameral legislature or a Congress with two houses, comes from the English model or the British model. Right? Parliament has a House of Lords and a House of Commons, a lower and an upper house. The lower house in our government is the House of Representatives. The upper house is the Senate. It should be no surprise that, because we came from England, basically our founding fathers were English, with English ancestry. They wanted to base our government on that. All right, so that's basically, I'm not going to go too into detail on that, but I will, the Reapportionment Act of 1929 capped the number of representatives in the House to 435. And everybody should know that there are 100 senators. That is because there are 2 per state. If you do the math, that means we have 50 states. 50 times 2 equals 100. And this just talks about how there was that Virginia plan and New Jersey plan where they had to, the Great Compromise, they had to, Virginia got its way because they said bigger states should get more representatives, right? That is, in the House, that's how it goes. But New Jersey, because they were a small state, they wanted equal representation. That's why there is an equal number of senators per state. We'll talk about that here in a little bit more. So powers of Congress. Powers of Congress, they have enumerated or actually given powers in the Constitution, and they have implied or inherent powers as well. Those refer more to the necessary and proper clause or the elastic clause. So enumerated powers or given powers are such they can create and pass laws. They can also set federal tax rates and regulate interstate commerce. We know about that. We looked at a court case. They can also authorize the use of spending money. So the stimulus bill, the CARE Act that President Trump just signed, that was authorized by Congress. And it can also borrow money. They can declare war, establish federal courts, all those things that we talked about throughout the year. But in regard to their implied powers, that goes to the necessary and proper clause, which is going to be on slide 15 as well. So that came out of McCulloch versus Maryland in 1819, which we broke down in class as well. But for sake of time, I'm not going to go through that now. The elastic clause does not give Congress unlimited power to do whatever they want. There are restrictions on that. They can do whatever they can make other laws that help them carry out their responsibilities. They just can't make any law they want. They have to make laws that help them do their job better. So right here, let's see, where was it? So yeah, right here, the court decided that as long as they make laws that are based on one of their powers or are consistent with the Constitution, it's okay. So they can't make laws that are unconstitutional. That should be obvious. And there are more limits on Congress's power, specifically the 10th Amendment that says the powers not delegated or given to Congress are therefore or prohibited to the states are therefore given to the states or the people. So we learned about the 10th many times, went over that many times. So non-legislative functions of of Congress, oversight functions. So they kind of keep an eye on everybody to make sure everybody is doing what they should be doing. So, for example, the president, if the president wants to appoint a federal judge, he has to get approval from appointments from Congress. They have to approve those nominations. Also, if you go down here, amending the Constitution is another role. So once again, it has to go to the 2/3 vote, has to be to be attained. So they play a big role in creating new amendments. And then on this slide, 17, we're going to be talking about impeachment, which is probably the most used, well, not most used, but the most newsworthy power Congress has had recently because of Donald Trump's impeachment. There have been, I'm going to say 4, right? It could be 3 or 4, however you look at it, 4 presidents that have been impeached, right? We have Andrew Johnson in the 1800s. He replaced Lincoln. Andrew Johnson, Bill Clinton, late 90s. Or I forgot, I jumped over. Nixon was not actually impeached, but he resigned or he quit before impeachment could start. So technically, I'm saying he could have been impeached. And then you have Clinton in the late 90s, and now we have Trump. And always remember, the House of Representatives, they do the investigation. They collect the evidence. And if they find enough evidence, they will impeach the president, which means they file impeachment charges against the president. That does not mean that the president is then kicked out of office. You have to wait for the Senate trial. So if the House has enough evidence, they vote on the articles of impeachment against the president. It then goes to the Senate. The Senate then has a trial to see if, just like any criminal trial, to see if the president is guilty or innocent. And if they are, or if they're found guilty, they're kicked out of office and they can never hold a federal government position. They could be mayor of Newark, but they could never be a federal politician. If they're not found guilty, they just go back to everyday life like Trump has now done. All right. So that's, in a nutshell, what that slide talks about. Districts and membership. So basically, this just talks about representatives in the House are spread out based on population. California has more representatives than Ohio does because they have more people living there. Senators are spread out evenly, okay? So 2 senators for Ohio are going to have to represent more people than the representatives for Ohio. So apportionment is what I just talked about. So the 435 seats in the House of Representatives are spread out throughout the United States, not evenly. Massachusetts, Rhode Island, Ohio, District of Columbia, California, they're all going to have different representative numbers because there's a different amount of people that lives in each one of those states. However, then on this, in regard to the Senate, it is equal because there are 2 per state. That is apportionment, or spreading out representatives. Redistricting is redrawing those congressional districts. So we have in Newark, Licking County area, there is a representative for the state that fields are, you can call him if you have complaints or ask questions, or he's our member in the House of Representatives, right? Ohio has so many, I can't remember, it's been so long, but I think 18 or something. So we have 18 for the whole state. The state's divided up into 18 parts to adequately represent the people. Redistricting happens every 10 years after a census. So 2020, the state's going to be redistricted. We're going to go through a redistricting process. That means that they're going to divide up and maybe redraw the boundaries to make things more equal. Maybe Columbus grew by 2 million people. That means we might have to kind of divide up the city into 2 parts, maybe to spread out that amount of people, so it's evenly represented. Gerrymandering. Remember, gerrymandering is illegal. They do it, but it's illegal. It's frowned upon, and it's illegal. All right, so state legislatures often redraw district lines in ways that benefit their party. So if the Republicans control if they control Ohio, they will redraw the boundaries in ways that benefit them. Extreme examples of partisan redistricting are referred to as gerrymandering. So this is extreme. All right, so you might wonder, and we talked about this, I think, gerrymandering, weird word, came from Elbridge Gerry way back in the 1800s, was the Massachusetts governor. He redrew the districts within Massachusetts to favor his party in an extreme way. So bad, a political cartoonist, right here, this is what they drew. they drew basically a picture of like a serpent kind of thing and put claws and teeth on it and everything and called it the gerrymander, kind of like a scary creature. But it's basically just saying, like, look at this. This doesn't make any sense why they drew some of these shapes on here. Completely doing it for advantage. This is asking you to reflect upon the gerrymandering and redistricting processes. Membership requirements, we went through this. So in the House, right, the House of Representatives, you have to be at least 25 years old, a citizen of the United States for at least 7 years, right? You can be an immigrant. The Senate, because it's a more exclusive club, you have to be at least 30 and been a citizen for 9 years, right? So you can also be an immigrant to be a senator. And then it goes up to 35 for the presidency, and you cannot be an immigrant to be the president. You have to be a natural born citizen, right? A citizen from the time you were born. You know, it goes up. So the House is the lowest rank, then you have the Senate, and then you have the presidency, obviously, is the most powerful person in our country. This is another lesson. So basically, to understand the diverse nature of the 113th Congress, which we are in currently, it's important to understand the basic characteristics of the members. Using this article, find the average age, party affiliation, gender, length of service of the voting members in both houses of Congress. All right? So that's a little math activity for you math people. All right, so these are the organization and leadership characteristics of the House and the Senate. The Speaker of the House, Nancy Pelosi, which we've talked about a lot of times. I've showed you a picture of her and JFK. She's very old, but she's very capable still, and she's many people believe she's doing a very good job. So the Speaker of the House is elected every year. So each session of Congress, so a session is 1 year, they vote for a new Speaker of the House. It could be the same person or it could be a newly elected individual. So she basically runs the House, makes sure that it goes, everything goes smoothly. She's the leader. What she says goes. She gets to recognize or ignore members who want to speak on the floor, as she interprets the House rules. Right? She determines which legislation is assigned to each committee. She appoints members to special committees, and she can delay or speed up the calendar for their meetings. So she basically has all the power. Okay, that's the, you know, she's third in line to be president. Very, 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 very powerful individual. The president of the Senate basically has no responsibilities other than voting in a tie. All right, they can't even vote normally. They have to vote in a tie. The Vice President of the United States, Mike Pence, is the president of the Senate. Literally all he does is vote to break a tie. That's it. We'll move on because there's nothing more. All right, so majority and minority leaders. So this kind of gets not confusing, but just listen closely. So the majority leader of the House or the Senate is the political party that has the most members. So, for example, the Democrats control the House of Representatives. Therefore, the majority leader in the House is a Democrat because the Democrats have the majority of the House. The minority leader in the House of Representatives would then be the Republicans because they have the they have the lower number of House members. Right. Same goes for the Senate. The currently the Republicans control the Senate because they have the majority of senators are Republican, and the minority are the Democrats in the Senate. Okay, so and that even goes with Ohio, right? The Ohio General Assembly. We have both parties. We have a legislature and a Senate. So right here it's backwards, I know, but Jay Hottinger is, some of you might know him. I believe his daughter went to or goes to the high school. He is the majority whip. So he helps the majority leader in Ohio's Senate. So he's a very, very powerful individual within the state. So I have his business card. Pretty cool. All right, moving on. Oh, but I will tell you, currently in the Senate, you heard this, you've heard their names most likely in my class, but also in the news. Mitch McConnell is the majority leader, Republican in the Senate, and Chuck Schumer is the Democrat minority leader in the Senate. Those individuals played big roles in Trump's impeachment. This is just a diagram of that hierarchy. All right, this asks you who leads the House of Representatives, which you should know, and how is their role different from the leader of the Senate? The leader of the Senate is the vice president. We talked about their power. All right, the party system. I'm not going to go too into depth into this because this is going to be our last unit here in a couple weeks before summer. This is what we're going to talk about. But basically, we know we have the Democrats and Republicans. We have a two-party system in the United States because of money. That's what it's dependent on. We talked about how third parties are there. There's hundreds of third parties, but because they don't have the followers or the money in the big name backing, they can't dominate or have success or find success on the national stage. Okay, so basically, if you want to have success or be, a senator or representative or if the president, you have to either be Republican or Democrat. It's sad to say, but that's just how things are because everything is controlled by money. Right? People, unless you're a billionaire yourself, kind of like Bloomberg was, you can't run unless you have the Democratic Party supporting you and giving you money, or the Republican Party giving you money as well. Very, very difficult to win. So this is a longer activity that you can. So it's making you basically apply your knowledge of the party system. Legislative process. So this basically is discussing. So bills and laws are the same thing. They start or can start in both houses, right? It could start in the House and then go to the Senate, or it could start in the Senate and go to the House. However, there's an exception, a very important exception that has to do with money once again. The only laws that have to start in the House of Representatives are appropriation bills or laws. Appropriations, some of you might remember, those are any bills or laws having to deal with money. So if the law has to deal with money, like the CARE Act that was just passed, it has to start in the House of Representatives and go to the Senate. Any other laws, like laws on you can't own tigers, that could start in the Senate and go to the House, or it could start in the House and go to the Senate. Whatever representative or senator proposed it would start there. Okay. The video here is a very nice video on how a bill becomes a law. You can also watch that Schoolhouse Rock, how a bill becomes a law, but you're not going to be quizzed over that. But it is important to know that money bills start in the House, and they have to be approved by both houses and then given to the president to sign into law. If it starts in the House, it has to be approved by the House, it has to be approved by the Senate, and then it has to be signed into law by the President of the United States. And it can be, those laws can be, those laws can be deemed unconstitutional by who? I'll give you a minute. They can be deemed unconstitutional by the Supreme Court. Right, and then you completed the tutorial, your little star, your little award, your golden star, because I can't give you any in class. All right, I'm going to end my screen share here. All right, so that is the unit on the legislative branch. I kind of went through a couple parts kind of fast because it was such review. We talked about that in depth in class, and I really enjoyed talking about it. And you guys probably got tired of it, but you should be fine on that. Once again, if you have any questions, feel free to reach out to me. You can email me. My email's on the staff directory on the high school's website. You can go to my website and then find my contact information to email me, message me on Play-Doh. And that's it. All right. Have a good week. Make the most out of this week. All right. We're getting closer to summer break, whether we like it or not. All right. Catch you later, alligator.